Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Deadly Weapon, Jack Wolfe, Book 5 by Mark Nolan, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. The veneer of civilization is paper thin. Tom Lantos. Kenai Peninsula, Alaska, summer fishing season. As a black helicopter took off from its private landing pad and flew fast and low over a forest of evergreens, the pilot, Ron Thompson, spoke into the mouthpiece on his headset. "McKay, I'm airborne. Give me the GPS coordinates." Ron had short-clipped brown hair, wore pilot Ray-Bans, and clenched an unlit Swisher Sweet cigar on the left side of his mouth. A display on the dash lit up with an image of Secret Service agent Shannon McKay in Washington, D.C., wearing a dark suit jacket, white blouse, and plain tie. She was using a program similar to FaceTime or Skype, but encrypted. "Sending the location now. Jake Wolfe is fishing for salmon on the Kenai River. You'll see a boat on the riverbank in a clearing where you can land." Ron nodded at her image on the display, observing her worried frown. "Is he expecting me? Your description of him has me a little uneasy. A good heart and a bad temper?" "When you arrive, mention my name and he'll listen to you. I've called him several times and I'll keep trying. But it's his adopted war dog you should be worried about. Cody won't hesitate to bite you on the crotch if he feels you're a threat to his handler." "Thanks for the warning. I'll be careful." McKay held his gaze. "You're one of the few people in the world who knows about this mission and about how many innocent people may die if we fail. I'm counting on you and Wolfe to succeed no matter what it takes." "Roger that," Ron responded as he signed off. McKay's image was replaced by two photos side by side. One showed the face of a man in his mid to late 20s with dark, wavy hair and a jaded smile. The other was of a golden retriever who gazed at the camera with curious, intelligent eyes. Ron knew Jake Wolfe was a Marine combat veteran who sometimes volunteered as a troubleshooter for a clandestine government agency. This time, though, Wolfe might find himself in over his head. He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his right forearm. Thoughts of the horrific threat they were facing and the resulting knot in his stomach caused him to increase airspeed even further, pushing the engines hard and racing toward Wolfe's location. On a beautiful summer morning lit by clear blue skies, Jake cast his fishing line into the Kenai River, allowing the plug lure to drift downstream along the bottom. Listening to the relaxing sound of the rushing river and breathing in the clean forest air, he patiently waited as the lure passed through a deep area of slack water. Suddenly, he felt a strike and set the hook. An extra-large salmon fought hard, but Jake reeled it in slowly and surely. His Inuit fishing buddy, Tuck-Two, stood by wearing waders and holding a low-key landing net. Wading into the river downstream, he netted the fish with practiced skill, brought it ashore, and walked up the bank, carrying the net and a wriggling 4-foot king salmon. "This must weigh 45 or 50 pounds. That's your limit, Jake. You only get one king like this." Jake smiled at his friend. "It's beauty, but keep it wet. I'm going to release it back into the wild." Tuck-Two nodded wisely and held the net so the fish remained underwater, but couldn't escape until they removed the hook. "See, I told you that plug with no bait would work like a charm." As Jake pulled a multi-tool out of his pocket, he reminded himself how much he needed the downtime of this annual fishing trip to deal with his lingering symptoms of PTSD from war deployments. The stress had flared up again recently on a visit to San Diego, and he was grateful for the opportunity to get away from it all in Alaska. Cody barked and splashed his front paws at the edge of the water while eagerly sniffing the freshly caught fish. Salmon was one of his favorite foods. A Marine IED detector dog who'd served on war deployments overseas and come home after being injured, Sergeant Cody was a Labrador Retriever and Golden Retriever mix, with one ornery Irish Terrier in the pedigree. He had a short, wavy coat of gold fur, a retriever grin, and intelligent eyes that gazed into yours as if reading your thoughts and feelings. Jake smiled. He knew the dog needed to enjoy the great outdoors as much as his handler. After Cody's return to the United States, he hadn't accepted his deprogramming. Although retrained as a civilian PTSD service dog, he was still a war dog through and through. Only a military dog handler like Jake could control the super smart, highly independent canine. While Tuck-Two held the net, Jake used the multi-tools pliers to carefully remove the hook from the salmon's mouth. Tuck-Two then lowered the net deeper and released the large fish back into the river. The Chinook swam away, and Cody barked at Jake as if he was disappointed with him for doing such a crazy thing. But Jake patted his dog on the back. "Let the orcas have that one. They love Chinook, and they need them to survive. We can eat sockeye. Tuck-Two, a broad-shouldered man with bronze skin, jet-black hair, and unique facial features revealing his proud Inuit heritage, agreed. And we've caught plenty of sockeye. This is the life, huh, Jukebox? Jake, whose call sign had been Jukebox because he would break into song at inappropriate moments, nodded at his friend. You're living the dream, Caribou. Thanks for inviting me again. This time I might never leave. Tuck-Two meant Caribou in the Inuktitut language, and Caribou had been his radio call sign in the Marines. Tuck-Two laughed heartily from deep within his barrel chest. This winter, when it's dark all the time, I'll put you to work chopping wood and shoveling snow. Then you'll leave. Jake grinned. They'd served together on deployments overseas and were fellow combat veterans, friends for life. Tuck-Two now ran a fishing guide business. Summer weather had melted the snow, and this secret spot was one of the best places to catch salmon. Across the river, an Alaskan brown bear appeared out of the evergreen forest and waded into the river on powerful legs. The large animal stood on its back feet and water up to its chest and used one massive paw to make repeated attempts to catching one of the many fish passing by. Finally pulling a sockeye salmon out of the river, the bear stood there and chewed on it with huge teeth, not the slightest bit concerned about the men and the dog. Cody growled at the bear, raising his hackles, but Jake warned. Out, Cody. Don't bother it. Jake used his phone to take a picture of the bear, thinking it would be fun to send the picture to some friends along with the text, I'm going to adopt this really big brown dog I found in Alaska. Not sure what kind it is. Instead, he had pocketed the phone without even glancing at his messages. This annual trip was his time to unplug. No Wi-Fi, no texting or phone calls, no checking the news or posting on social media, no email while it was set on vacation responder. He hadn't even bothered to shave for the past week. Tuck-Two pointed out 2 bald eagles circling overhead not far above them. Want to feed the eagles? Hold on to your retriever while I throw a fish over there to their favorite spot. Jake held on to Cody's collar. Sit, Cody. Stay. Cody sat and watched intently as Tuck-Two tossed a sockeye salmon through the air. It landed on the riverbank below a tree, and Cody leaned forward, straining against his collar. Stay, Jake said. Cupping both hands near his mouth, Tuck-Two produced a mean imitation of an eagle's cry. Cody stared at him and quirked a brow, making Jake smile. Although dogs don't have actual eyebrows, some, like Cody, have darker hair markings that look just like brows. The eagles cried in reply, flew down, and landed on the riverbank with their wings flapping. Jake was amazed at their 8-foot wingspan. Sinking talons into the salmon, the birds of prey used their sharp beaks to tear off bites and swallow them. You probably won't believe me, Tuck-Two told him, but I once saw over 1,000 eagles land on this riverbank to catch spawning salmon. Jake studied his friend. If you tell me you saw it, I believe you. Tuck-Two held up his phone and displayed a photo of 1,000 bald eagles blanketing the riverbank. Jake nodded. Alaska is God's country. Everything in nature seems bigger and more beautiful here. Cody suddenly alerted, tilted his head, and looked skyward. Jake glanced at his dog and then at his Inuit friend, who turned and listened too, reaching for the pistol in his belt holster. Jake knew the weapon was loaded with 45 hollow point rounds. He drew his own 9mm pistol from a small-of-the-back SOB holster beneath his windbreaker. Flying to Alaska on a private jet had its advantages. A moment later, Jake heard a helicopter approaching at high speed. It sounded as if the pilot was pushing the engines hard. Too hard. Something wasn't right. He and Tuck-Two exchanged a glance. Not good. Although Jake was no longer active duty in the Marines after his end of active service when he eased out, he belonged to an off-the-books government agency that occasionally called upon him to serve his nation by assassinating wanted terrorists and high-value targets. He was assuming this must be the agency coming to take him on an unannounced emergency mission, or one of his many enemies planning to kill him. Either way, his fishing trip was over too soon, and that pissed him off.